Hey, this is Aaron at Power Popaholic, and I am talking to Steve McDonald from Red Cross. He has just finished a double album. He's also done a US tour, and there is a book coming out, and there is a documentary that has come out called about the history of Red Cross. How has the tour been going, Steve?
That tour was great. We did about 6 weeks in the US, and I think it's the longest tour that Red Cross has done of the US in a really long time, or headlining tour, that is, probably since the 90s.
Wow.
It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah, no, I've enjoyed your music since the 90s. I think I listened first album I heard from you guys was Phase Shifter
Mm.
back then, and you guys kind of looked like Jellyfish, but you didn't sound like Jellyfish. You were, a little bit more garagey version at that point, in in the 80s and 90s. So tell me a little bit about, like, what's the big difference? Because there's a lot that's been said and written about you, about how you started when you were 11-year-old, and Black Flag, and playing at concerts, house concerts, where basically you were being booed. How, what did you learn from those guys growing up playing house concerts?
Well, the first gig that we ever played was an eighth grade graduation party in a living room. That's true. But I always like to clarify that Black Flag played too, but we got them the gig.
That's great.
Uh, and yeah, we had to deal with an antagonistic crowd. Was our first show. It was an antagonistic crowd of our peers. I was younger. I was 11. It was an eighth grade graduation party. So it was a bunch of irate 13-year-olds. And then also like older teenage dudes that showed up probably inappropriately. And they felt empowered to give us a hard time because we were playing punk rock music. And in 1979, in our little suburban town outside in the suburbs of LA, that music wasn't really known. And if you played a backyard party or a living room like we were doing, you were basically expected to play top 40 covers. And we had written our own songs. We had songs like Annette's Got the Hits and I Hate My School. And
Mhm.
we played those for people. And we just learned how to deal with it, as this it was sort of trial by fire. And then when Black Flag played later on, they were in their mid-20s and the kids didn't feel empowered to give them a hard time, but they didn't approve of what they were doing either. Once again, they weren't playing top 40 covers, and they were playing punk rock. And the kids just basically left as opposed to booing us. They left. They left the living room. And so it was just our band and Black Flag. And we had a private Black Flag concert. And it was the sort of holy grail lineup of Black Flag with Robo and Keith, the first Nervous Breakdown EP. But yeah, yeah, that was the early days. And then we soon played in front of an actual an audience of adults or whatever, but Black Flag got us some gigs. We they
That's
they
good.
they returned the favor. And our first gig was at a park called Pollywog Park, and it was an infamous, somewhat of a riot. People were polite to us. It was sort of like a daytime, it was supposed to be like a daytime light jazz series in
Really?
McDonald,
Oh, wow.
California. And Black Flag had misrepresented themselves and sent a like a some kind of light music, like I don't know, maybe some Steely Dan demos or something to them.
Wow.
I
Wow.
don't know
What a
what they sent
change.
them, but they misrepresented themselves to the organizers. And at any rate, but the families that were picnicking, they were polite to us. We were little kids doing our best sort of Ramones inspired pop punk
Right.
before that was a term, I guess. And then when Black Flag played, Keith was and purposely antagonizing the crowd, and lots of cuss words and
Yeah, he's trying to get, the crowd all riled up to get them, like,
right. So that
on
was
their
something I
feet.
saw. Like I would say they somewhere like our inadvertent mentors of the time. And we saw them, if the crowd wasn't antagonizing them, well, then they would antagonize the crowd until they antagonized them. So we kind of had this like, um, yeah, a little bit of like a baptism in in uh, in these practices early on, and then soon after, Black Flag started playing regular nightclubs in Los Angeles and Hollywood, and since they had taken us under their wing, they invited us along, and we played, sort of these landmark punk clubs like the Hong Kong Cafe,
Mhm.
in downtown LA with them. And that was a whole other scene. That was a small group of weirdos, and they immediately embraced us. And we didn't have to flex our antagonizing audience muscles. We didn't, we had instant approval. In fact, we even got signed at our first proper gig by Robbie Fields of Posh Boy Records,
Mm.
which is very poppy, actually. If you go back and listen to his first compilation record that he put out, it was called Beach Boulevard. And it
Mhm.
was definitely like some sort of like, it was the Robert Johnson of of uh of pop punk, I would say, that record.
Okay.
Bands
Well,
like the Simple
eventually,
Plan.
eventually you would move on to play with and open for bigger bands and bigger crowds. I think. And is there anything that where you had to flex that muscle again, or basically
Yeah.
the crowds at this point basically were accepting of you, or was there a band that you played with where they really didn't want to see you, they wanted to see the other band and kind of tried to shuffle you off?
Yeah, sure. That happened off and on throughout the years. And, we did a lot of headlining shows too. And we eventually started, developing our own crowd. But, you do this thing, especially in the 80s and 90s, if you're signed to a major label and they've invested a bunch of money into your record, you're trying to grow your audience. It's like this artificial growth. It's like taking steroids for your audience growth, and you're really hoping that you get some kind of traction and that it explodes. And it for a very small percentage of people that works, our
Hmm.
bands. But for most of the rest of us, you just kind of get tolerated for your half hour, 40 minutes that you're on stage. And you're maybe the record company or the publicity firm, they get to try to market you to radio stations and stuff, et cetera, while you're in town playing a very, forgettable Eve show. But, but yes, to answer your question, yeah, the one thing that comes to mind was I remember we were opening for the Go-Go's first reunion tour in 1990. And this is 11 years after our first show. So
Right.
we're sort of veterans at this point, but we're trying to break through to their sort of mainstream crowd in Dallas, Texas, at a place called the Bronco Bowl, which was sort of this infamous, um, rowdy environment. I think they usually
Right.
had rodeos at the Bronco Bowl. It was a gigantic multi entertainment complex that had a bowling alley, but also had sawdust on the floor. And it
Right.
had some kind of like 6,000 seat arena where they might have had rodeos. And I remember the crowd felt very empowered to tell us they did not approve of us. And it's funny because it's the Go-Go's, but it's also Dallas, Texas, and they were it's kind of a tough crowd. I say the Go-Go's because you kind of think maybe, especially early on, that the majority of their crowd were teenage girls, and you think they would maybe not be so scary and rowdy, but this was a bunch of good old boys at the
They wanted to see the women, I
they
guess.
wanted, yeah, they wanted We Got the Beat, and they wanted it then and now. And but we never backed down. We just, if anything, we would learn to antagonize the crowd right back. And if we were, you know, playing with a sort of a really macho punk band, well then, and they thought that we were, sexually ambiguous and giving us a hard time, then we would just blow them kisses and make them more angry. And
Excellent. I that you lead it right into the next question I had was, you ended up getting married to one of the Go-Go's, Charlotte Caffrey. How did you end up meeting her? Was it at that reunion, or was what happened? How did that come about? Because it seems like a great match that two musicians get together and they're in separate bands. You
Yeah.
finish the sentence here.
Well, I can speak about my sister-in-law, Charlotte Cathy.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay. No, no, but you also married a musician as well.
I did.
Yes. Okay.
I
All right.
did.
So
Uh,
pardon my screw up.
that's okay. But I mean, yeah, I was there. I can speak about, I wasn't there for all of the moments, the more intimate moments, but I was on that tour when Red Cross opened for the Go-Go's and Jane, and I want to say Jane Drano, Jane Weedland, her
Wayland,
punk rock
yeah.
name, Drano. Jane Weedland told Jeff, my brother and
Yep.
bandmate, Charlotte thinks you're cute. So that's how that happened. And then Jeff took the cue, and he had been a big Go-Go's fan because we used to see them back at the very beginnings of our career when we were little kids, and um, we saw them at the Hong Kong Cafe. Jeff was 16, and had braces and a camera, and he would take pictures for his Photoshop
Wow.
class. And yeah, and it was, it seems to be a good fit for us to be partnered with other lifers, musician type lifers.
So do you
Because
and your so Steve, do you and your brother Jeff, get into like, heated arguments on stage? Very much like I'm thinking of another brotherly duo, like Ray and Dave Davies of the Kinks. How they would they break up the band, then the band come back together like a few days later. Did you have any kind of interactions like that along the way?
yeah. Yeah, it's a well, I think any band is somewhat of like what I would term a dysfunctional family. Um, and not to get too pop psychology on you, but I've been in a bunch of bands now, and besides just Red Cross,
Right.
and it's always complicated. It doesn't matter how it's structured; it's always complicated. But and then add the extra, whatever dynamic of siblings, of actual, families, uh, then it can be even more explosive, or it can also be really rewarding. It can also be, you can also say they have some sort of leg up creatively because this person that you're playing with has shared so many experiences along with you, and you have a lot of the same points of reference, a lot of what you like and don't like, the culture creating part of a group is just kind of sorted out already because you had so many experiences together growing up. But then there's also all the extra stuff of like, you might have had differences along the way too.
Right.
And when you create, you're automatically going to have differences, if you bring authentic people together, and perhaps when you having a creative difference, it might spark some kind of unresolved difference from earlier in your experience
Okay.
with the person, and that may be why Ray and Dave, to everybody else, seem to be disagreeing about a clothing choice or a note choice, but suddenly it becomes fisticuffs, and it's shocking to everybody. And my sort of Dr. Phil take on that is that it wasn't just about the clothing choice or the note choice. It was also about some kind of lack of consideration in 20 years earlier, perhaps.
Wow. Yeah.
and and it's hard, but I think, as you can tell, I'm speaking in bumper stickers. I've worked really hard to to fortify myself with
Sure.
what it takes to accept the situations and people around me, and change what I can, which is always just my reaction to it. And then
Sure.
so, but you can't always count on your partner doing that, so it could be complicated. But you know we did just finish a double album, it's true. And when I think of the term dysfunctional, I think of like, okay, so dysfunctional means like you don't function, and if you don't function, then what gets done? Well, when something doesn't function, it's broken, nothing gets done.
Right.
And so when I see that we have an 18-song album, I feel like, okay, we're functioning. Okay, so there is there is hope. But really, the proof is in the pudding, right? It's like I think that's what you were
Yeah,
trying
let's get to that pudding. I think
to go.
let's dig over to the new album,
Yeah.
which is phenomenal album. It's in my top 10 list for this year for 2024. It's great. I love you have like a lot of highlights here. Too many highlights to name, but I'll name a few. I mean, I love Stunt Queen. It just lends itself to a big crowded arena and everyone singing along. I also love the stories behind a lot of the band. A lot of the songs, like Terrible Band and What's in It for You. Those I particularly love because they're, it's very much like a sounding board. It's almost like you're hearing feedback and you're bringing that feedback around through a loop out to the audience a little bit.
Yeah. Terrible band. Well, there's an opening line. Oh wait, was girl? Which was it? Dun, dun, strawberry blonde. Cut her hair, then she was. Oh wait, she cut her hair like a punk or a nun, hoping that she would belong. Um, I'm
Yeah.
forgetting the first lines, which I'm just having a brain freeze. But Jeff had been talking a lot about cults when we were around the time that we were starting to make the record, and we worked with our producer Josh Klinghoffer, and the two of them would often be watching documentaries about cults when I would go into the lounge in
Mhm.
between um, backing vocal sessions or something that I'd been doing, and it kind of became a little bit of a theme. And then I think that, yeah, the song is called Terrible Band because then we bring it back to rock bands, which are like cults, and often with charismatic leaders that are sort of like cult leaders. And then sometimes there are cults that are bands. And and there's some that my brother knows more about, but I know there was like the Father Yod Source family, and they were a band in Los Angeles, and they were also like a macrobiotic, um, early, very progressive vegetarian restaurant owning and
Okay.
operating group in Hollywood. And then they were also these hippies that moved to Hawaii, and Sky Saxon followed them of the Seeds, Sky Saxon.
Oh
And
yes.
yeah, and I remember, so I know that the Source family was somewhat of fodder for some of that, but then there might also be some more specific stuff about bands that we might have played with in our history and, just different things like that. But cults and bands, yes.
Well, let me ask you one thing. So, do you have a there because there are quite a bit of songs on here. There's like 18 songs. Is there
There are
any
18.
that's your favorite on this album?
Oh, well, I mean, well, the opening track on the record is a Jeff McDonald song that he wrote like 15 years ago, and it missed two of our records. I don't know what
Hmm.
I don't know what we were thinking.
Candy colored catastrophe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I love that song. I like this idea of it asks the question, you know, who gets to say if it's art at all?
Mm.
And but at the same time, he's kind of poking fun at a specific pop artist who has a fine arts career. So it's multi-layered, where he is kind of being a bit of a critic and making fun, but then he's also asking, like, how do we, who even gets to say anyways? And maybe asking the question about questioning, art criticism in general,
Mm.
and which we would fall, and I think music is, I relate to it, but he was talking specifically about the fine arts in that moment, but like painting and stuff. But I love Josh Klinghoffer, our producer, really fell in love with that song, and he really did a killer, knocked it out of the park, and with his vision for it. That one, and then it's, and it has the most streams. I check out these things, so it's probably the song that people will most know from the record. It's the first song on the record. It was also the first video. Um, the song that for me has the most sort of sentimental attachment that I'm really, really proud of is the third track on the record, The Main Attraction. And
Mhm.
and especially since we're on the Power Popaholics podcast, I feel like your listeners might really respond to that one and should give it a shot. It's got this really soaring melodic sense to it, and I'm
Yes.
proud of the fact that Jeff and I sing in beautiful harmony, um, 95% of the song, and the first part is us trading lines, so it's sort of like a duet. And it came to me, and I'm cautious to use these lofty expressions like the song came to me, like I channel it. But that's the way my idols talk about writing songs. And so maybe I can too.
Absolutely, you can.
And and it came at once, all at once. It was at least the music, the all the melodies, the chord changes, how many times to do everything. It's all there on the very first time I recorded it on my iPhone. I just didn't have the actual lyrics sorted out. It's just la-las. And so it seemed magical. And when it came was sort of at a time I was thinking of someone that needed their spirits lifting. So it was neat that all these soaring moments just, I guess, flowed through me.
Came in. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I don't know if it can happen again, but I'd love,
I'm sure it can. I'm sure
yeah.
it can. You guys are extremely talented, and I haven't heard really a horrible song come out of you guys, to be quite honest.
Well, that's not,
Let me switch back up just a little bit
oh,
to researching the blues from 2012. One of my
yeah.
favorite songs on that album is like what I would call the big riff song, like
Uh-huh.
Meet Frankenstein.
Oh,
Great,
yeah. It's a good one.
great big riff song. I mean, when you're developing songs, do you often start with the big riff first, or do you think up, or you just sort of are jamming along and then you find something while you're jamming?
Yeah, I think it's all different ways. It's
Oh,
all
okay.
different ways. And we really did it all different ways on the new record. That record, Researching the Blues, was Jeff wrote all the songs on that record, and then I produced it, and which I
Ah,
did do all the knob turning and I whatever booked the studio time and things like that. But all the practical stuff, and but but yeah, I mean, it can happen a bunch of different ways, and uh, it seems like on this most recent record we wrote on our own, and then we got together and wrote. And so some songs we started on our own, we finished them together. Some songs we started on our own and finished by ourselves. And
got
then
it.
some songs were just kind of born out of us being in a room together and chords started happening and melodies started happening. And then lyric writing is really helpful with the partnership. And, I am such a insane fan of music. And we'd all seen Get Back documentary in the whatever a year ago or 2 years ago, whenever that sort of late pandemic.
Right.
And it was such a great insight into the creative process of the greatest songwriters of the rock era.
True.
And and it was so demystifying because they were just normal people. They were just regular people. I mean, granted, they were really gracious and um, you know, beyond their years, the thought that they were in their 20s and handling each other in such an elevated, evolved way is super impressive. But for the most part, they're just regular people. And when they were first working up their new songs, they sounded trashy and garbagey and not perfect. And they had to work on them. And that was so remarkably encouraging, validating, all that stuff, approving,
Nice.
and it just made me want to get in the room with my brother. And especially like like the way Paul was seemed so enamored, but John, at least that's
Yep.
sort of the takeaways I got. One of the takeaways I got, and not just that he idolized John, it was more like he in real time appreciated John. In real time, he could tell that this was a unique situation, and that I mean, I'm a lot of projection going on, I'm sure, on my part. But but at least, or at least the way the filmmakers edited, what I got from it was something I wanted to get from my own relationship, which is in real time, appreciate the unique quality of having a partnership, and that you can have someone that you don't have to dismiss their opinion to move forward with your own thoughts.
Got it.
You can give their opinion equal esteem in your head, and it doesn't like make everything, it doesn't take away from you. It doesn't make um progress come to a halt like it does in many working environments, where someone wants to do this, but I want to do that. And then, oh, what do we do? And, and instead it would be like they would be finishing each other's sentences, or, or someone could say, like Paul McCartney, I don't know him, often talks about, oh, that line in Hey Jude, the line about the on your shoulder. I can't remember the whole line, but he was always like he'd played it for John and said, oh yeah, that's just some words that the syllables fit the melody. And John's like, it's the best line. And
Yeah, that's where you get into that synergy of
well, and
partnership.
it's also it's like where it's really unique to have another human being that you have that, yes, synergy with, and that you respect, and you in real time. It's not often, it's in retrospect that we think about those relationships that we had. It's often in retrospect we think like, oh, I should have listened more, and or maybe they had more to offer, and why was I so shut down to that? And but instead in real time they were very um into each other that way. And so I feel really lucky that, with my sibling, we can do that sometimes, and I can't
Yeah,
always expect it to happen, but that's what we did on this record. and
right.
and for 10 of the songs we really did it that way. And it functioned. And, maybe it's the only time it will happen. Who knows?
Oh, I
But
hope not. I want to hear more from both you guys. It's just tremendous. Let me sort of wrap things up a little bit here. Um, I know the book is due out in October. The documentary came out already, but when is it going to
not
be wide?
really.
Not really. It
Documentary.
was like it premiered.
Well, no, it's played at film festivals.
Right. I'm
It was
asking.
part of a film festival
Mhm.
circuit, but they're
Yes.
still I think they're kind of finalizing some distribution, and hopefully there'll be showings in, major markets. And then from that point, it'll be distributed either maybe a streaming thing will come along, or there'll also be physical distribution of some
I
sort.
I cannot wait to see it, to be quite
Oh,
honest.
great. Yeah, people
I'm very
seem to
excited
like
for
it.
that and the book. And after this tour is done, I mean, you can't tell me that this will be the last album. You've got to have another album in you.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's the end, although some could read into it that way. The record is this big kind of self-identifying opus as
Yeah,
far as we've been able to do, and double record. And it's um the final song on the record is the closing credit title song to our documentary. Born Innocent is the name of the film, and that's the name
right,
of the song. And it's also sort of telling, it's like an origin story song, sort of like Creek Alley by the Mamas and the Papas, or
right.
there's examples of those origin story songs I'm forgetting right now. But and you could kind of, so it's all wrapped up in a bow now, and it's done. Um, but I don't, I don't see, I've tried to get away from this racket before.
It's
I
in
don't
your
think it's
blood, man.
possible for me. I think that I'm a lifer.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good thing. Don't say it like it's an apologetic thing. I look forward to, more music from you and your brother,
Hmm.
and I think you've done a terrific job with, this current album. Nice red cover, almost like the White Album, except all red. I
It's
love
terry
that.
cloth.
Yes,
It's a
it's beautiful.
towel. It's a terry cloth towel that I had embroidered.
Very nice.
Yeah.
So, thank you so much, Stephen McDonald, Red Cross, for spending some time with me and giving me some insight into your process and how you think. It was awesome talking to you, and we look forward to, you know, playing more and hearing more.
Yeah. Thank you so much. We're going to Europe in the fall. So if any of your listeners are in one of those territories, please check your local listings. Um, or even, make a
Check the
road trip.
website, right? You got
Well,
redcross.com?
sure. Redcross.com always has all of our dates, and there's also like our social media presence. We're not too hard to find.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, it's an ambitious tour and we're excited about it. So we're hoping people will make their way out.
All right. Thanks so much, Stephen. Appreciate it
Ah,
so much.
cheers.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye.
Bye.